Okay, here we are, hour number 2 already. Webster Tarpley joins us this hour, America's greatest living historian, in my view, friend of this program and yours for many, many years now. Here we are, and Webster, 3 years to go. People were asking what Obama was going to do. A lame duck. Was he going to get divorced? Was he going to sit around the old ballroom and watch the big screen TV? Basketball, round ball, football, doesn't matter. What's he going to do? Well, he told us a couple of weeks ago, last Monday, that he was going to use his pen and his phone and to hell with the Congress. Not a big surprise.
No.
Tell us what.
Yes, that's the Republican caricature.
Okay,
right? That's what the reactionaries are drooling.
Now, I heard him say it, but I wanted you to tell me what he was saying when he said that. He said, "I'm basically not going to be stalled and held back by legislation and waiting on same from the Congress." He said, "Quote, I've got a pen and I've got a phone." And then he went on from there to make it clear that he was going to use executive orders. Now, does this bother us or not?
No. The question is the quality of the executive orders. Executive orders to do what? If it's executive orders for the idiot chimera of global warming and imposing austerity for the polar bears, the pelicans, and the
polar bears are already dying of radiation, so let's take them off the list.
We have to worry about humans, right? The subjects of politics are human beings, and of course, then the environment for humans. That's also true. But
okay, so I just wanted to get that on the table.
Look, you're putting yourself in a relatively vulnerable position because we have the greatest saboteurs that we've ever seen, right? The reactionary Republicans and their fascist faction, the Tea Party, have successfully blocked all government. And you've now reached the point of rule by decree, which they have, in effect, imposed.
Okay, let me get this straight. I haven't put myself in any position. Asking questions does not compromise anyone. However, what you just said was very interesting. You're suggesting, in your view, and I'm sure you could back it up, that the reactionary Republican lunatics have forced him to make this, let's call it a proclamation. I'm going to rule by decree.
There are points when the business of government has to get done. Now, let's first a couple of things about the current situation, right? There's nothing to bring forward the most sardonic laughter than the saboteurs of the state, right? The anarchists, the bankrupters of the state, coming forward and saying, now, how dare you take emergency measures after we've successfully tied the whole thing up in knots. Now, it is a serious question. The point in the Weimar Republic where rule by decree started, very interesting. It's March 1930, which is the fall of the Hermann Müller Social Democratic-led government. And it fell over something very similar to the leading issue today, extended unemployment benefits and how to pay for extended unemployment benefits. It is uncanny. Uncanny. As Marx writes somewhere, he says they don't know it, but they do it. And like Marx, I don't like him that much, but fact is, these characters of today they seem to be forced to repeat all the mistakes, even though some of them have actually studied the mistakes.
We'll get to Yellen. That's a very interesting overlay.
In a minute. So the Hermann Müller government, we reached March of 1930, and the big banks in Berlin and the big industrialists of the Ruhr and Silesia were saying, okay, now we've got to cut the employer contribution to unemployment benefits. We got to make other workers pay for that. So the tax on all workers goes up to pay for the unemployment benefits of the unemployed. And at that point, the Social Democrats said no. Hermann Müller of the SPD, Social Democrats, his government fell. And from that point until Hitler's seizure of power, just about 3 years later, slightly less than 3 years, but almost 3 years later, there was no majority, and anything that got done by a decree. And the main practitioner of the decrees was Brüning, right? Heinrich Brüning, or Brüning. And these were the so-called Notverordnungen, emergency decrees. That's what it means. And these were austerity decrees, deflationary austerity decrees. So those were very, very bad austerity decrees. Now, when Obama comes forward and says, I'm going to do an executive order which raises the wage rate, imposes a minimum wage on future federal contracts, this is a trifling matter, but this is well within the prerogatives of a president. And anybody who screams at that is nuts. They're just showing how naive, how ignorant, how they're being led around by...
Well, they may not be nuts. They're just not as informed as you are.
Well, this is the world of Frank Luntz and Karl Rove, right, at this point, right? Republican sloganeering. But it is a serious question. Now, it's also very interesting that Italy entered the area of rule by decree at just about the same time as the United States in the past couple of weeks. What we had last week in Rome was a decree law, which was another bad one. The Italian system has the decree law built in. And it's much more common. It's been much more common because of the instability of the post-war Italian governments. But they had a decree going which essentially said the real estate tax, the tax people pay on their homes, is postponed, and about $8 or $10 billion are transferred from the Bank of Italy to the private banks. So it was a bad decree.
Okay.
But at that point, when the Speaker of the Italian House, the Chamber of Deputies, the woman called Boldrini, and she's also quite bad. She's a raving ideologue. She said, all right, now we're going to vote on this. The Beppe Grillo party, which is in many ways a fascist or Pujadist party. I can't go into what that all means, but think of them as sort of fascism light. Those guys caused a riot in the Italian Chamber of Deputies. They stormed the seats where the government usually sits in the front, and some women were punched, and this was the greatest riot in the history of the Italian Parliament since 1944. But what happened then was that this woman, Boldrini, the speaker, said, okay, I'm using the so-called guillotine provision. I'm cutting off debate, I'm starting the vote, and I'm ending the vote, and it passed. So Italy has entered an acute, extreme form of rule by decree. Now, here we are with rule by decree in the United States. Somewhat, right? Because remember, the Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order, okay? One of the greatest things ever done. So the question is the quality of the executive order. Now, again, if Obama says, I'm coming out here and I'm going to impose a tax on greenhouse gases, he's on his road to collapse, right? He'll be out of there fairly soon. However, let's think of some decrees, some executive orders again that would make sense. One would be to Lou, right? Secretary of the Treasury Lou, executive order to you. You will obey the 14th Amendment, Section 4. You will pay the public debt of the United States no matter what happens. The debt ceiling is unconstitutional, and national bankruptcy is illegal. So you're going to pay. And it means that whatever happens with the debt ceiling, you will continue to run Treasury auctions, bring in the money, and we're going to have business as usual. We're not going under. And you Republican fascists, you can like it or lump it. And this would have tremendous support. Then we could think of some other things, right? We're operating under a wartime situation, right? People forget it. We're at war. There's a war going on in Afghanistan, and legally speaking, we're operating under that infamous resolution to use military force from September 2001, the one that Ron Paul voted for before he turned against it, right? Just to recall. Yep. So we're a state of emergency, and the Republicans were the ones who brought it on. Fine. What you could do now is say, extended unemployment. Well, I'm the president. The Congress is paralyzed. Under the Defense Production Act, and people should take a look at the Defense Production Act, it's a beauty. The president can do just about anything. It's all in the Defense Production Act. Obama could say, I wish he would say, we've got to maintain our labor force. We can't have our valuable workers starving or, dying or, being homeless and all this stuff. I am going to impose the indefinite prolongation of extended unemployment benefits. Those are the kinds of executive orders that make sense and would be supported by 70, 80, 90% of the American people. So it's all the question, executive orders for what?
Right, a new populism if he were to do that. Executive orders for what? And we will find out fairly soon. We'll find out. Hold on a minute. Be right back with Mr. T as we continue. Okay, Webster Tarpley and I and all of you good people, let's carry on, Webster.
Jeff, I'll give you another executive order that I would love to see.
Okay.
This is now the Federal Reserve, okay? We know that the Federal Reserve operates in an area of absolute illegality, total anarchy.
Totally.
Because what happens is that Helicopter Ben Bernanke, or his now successor, since we're now in the first week of the Yellen era, Yellen gets a phone call from Jamie Dimon or Lloyd Blankfein, right, of J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs, whatever it is, and they tell her what they want. They say, we need this, this, and this.
It's really
and
that
Helicopter
simple, folks.
Ben,
that's not a joke either.
Helicopter Ben opened these credit facilities. He said, you want term auction facility, TAF, TALF, primary dealer credit facility, money market credit facilities for AIG, Maiden Lane, a whole list. Now, it would be possible to do this by phone call, but to keep keep up appearances, this could be an executive order. The president issues an executive order. It goes to Yellen, and it says, given my powers as president under the Defense Production Act, given the war emergency, the 9/11 emergency, and we have a bunch of emergencies, right? It's hard to keep track, but we have at least one, and we probably have two or three. He could say, we need an economic recovery. We haven't had one. Your policies have failed. Therefore, what you will now do is to open the following windows. We want $5 trillion made available to states and authorities for bonds. The bonds are 0% 100-year bonds to build all kinds of infrastructure. Governors should come forward. Any governor who's got a meaningful infrastructure project shovel-ready, come forward. Now, in the Obama stimulus, there was about $200 billion of this. It was good, but it was not enough. It was a drop in the bucket. Let's get $5 trillion, right? The Federal Reserve can generate any amount of credit. Why do we need to borrow money from China? We can generate it ourselves. We've just seen the entire world credit system depends on loans from the Federal Reserve, right? Barclays Bank, Societe Generale, Deutsche Bank, Unicredito of Italy, all of these have depended on loans directly from the U.S. Federal Reserve. So $5 trillion for infrastructure, right? We want to build superhighways, modern rail, high-speed, maglev. We want to build modern electricity grids.
Well, I'm all for what you've been saying for years on this program.
We've
got to turn toward ourselves and rebuild the infrastructure. That's where the money needs to go.
You can also do this. This can also be done for the Export-Import Bank. The Export-Import Bank goes into high gear with this stuff because they could get 0% credit too. But the other obvious thing is with the whole younger generation being crushed by student loans, why not at least refinance all of that into 0%?
Why should they pay more? Let's invest in our future. Come on.
That could be done through the Federal Reserve. You could have an executive order with 3 or 4 of these points that would create a recovery. Now, of course, the fascist Republicans would scream, oh, how dare you interfere with the wonderful independence of our wonderful central bank, which allows Lloyd Blankfein and Jamie Dimon to make the phone call and Pandit the Bandit when he was there at Citibank. They could call Helicopter Ben and tell him what they wanted. He would do it. How dare you interfere with that system? Where do you think the American people would come down when they could see tens of thousands of new jobs per week, right? 50, 100,000 new jobs per week as this tremendous juggernaut of production began to take off. They wouldn't care about the niceties of whether it's an independent central bank. They'd say, look, if the independent central bank is what got us into the Depression, let's nationalize it, let's seize it, let's deprivatize it, right? Let's put it immediately under executive orders. Executive orders is much better than getting phone calls from Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs. So those are the executive orders. You see what I'm getting at? The system is blocked, right? Yeah. It's blocked.
Yep.
But life has to go on. I can't sit here and die because Boehner has to, cater to his fascist Tea Party right wing and therefore block everything. No, it's crazy. Another thing you could do, it just goes on and on, right? You can, for example, say executive order. Any bank that took TARP money, Treasury money, or Federal Reserve money has to stop foreclosures on primary residences. Right? No more foreclosures. If you took federal money, you got to stop foreclosing. That should have been built into the TARP.
Oh, I agree.
But under Bush and under Paulson and so forth, it didn't get done. So I don't care about executive orders. Why should you care about that? George Washington had executive orders, and again, one of the greatest things in American history is the Emancipation Proclamation. It's an executive order.
Okay, but they weren't called executive orders back then.
Sure they were.
Executive order, that was the exact name of it. No.
Well,
no.
These are I don't know, that would be an interesting question. When did the actual term executive orders come in? But these were, in effect, what we would call today executive orders.
Okay, it really is up to the man. If we have a man with credibility, honor, integrity, we got nothing to worry about. There are people out there who are concerned, and I'm not a reactionary Republican, you know me very well. But this is an avenue open to potential abuse.
Yeah, of course.
Let's leave it at that.
Of course. So, again, today, nothing works without a mass movement, right? You want to keep anybody honest, doesn't matter who. You better have a mass movement that they dare not cross. So, but you see, the whole point is the people, the libertarians, right? I would say the dupes of finance capital. They're out there screaming along with the Republicans in one chorus of idiots. That takes you out of the picture. In other words, you're not. If that's the only thing you can say is, we don't like executive orders. You're out of it, and you don't have anything to offer the American people.
Did you see
you think Joe Sixpack cares whether he gets a job through an executive order or through something that's gone through the Congress and been approved by Boehner?
Wow. Have you noticed that story that Romney allegedly admitted that there was some chicanery involved to take the momentum and the nomination away from Ron Paul? Did you see that story? I thought you'd laugh. No,
Look,
I did.
You should read my book. I wrote a book about this called Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover
I told you,
America.
I commended you on the title. I thought it was one of the great titles.
And in that book, I explain in some detail how Ron Paul was an integral part of the Romney campaign.
Well, we talked about it here.
He was the right wing. He was the right bumper, the right wingman of Romney, meaning that any challenge, such as Santorum, which is what happened, any challenge emerging from the right of Romney would be crippled by the presence of Ron Paul. On the other wing was Huntsman, who was the left bumper. And, for example, suppose our dear friend Chris Christie, right, the Garden State Gearman, if he had tried to throw his hat in the ring, they would have channeled more money to Huntsman to protect Romney from that flank.
Well, interesting.
But this is what people have to understand. Ron Paul was a shill for Romney, and the idea was if his votes were needed, then the price would have been little rand on the ticket as vice president. Because that's for the whole damn thing. A swindle for this rotten, ghastly family, the Paultards.
Well, no fan of Little Rand here. Hang on. Be back in just a minute with Webster, and we will talk about more. Stay tuned. Okay, and here we are back. Lots on the table. All right, onward, and let's see where we go next.
Why don't we talk about the European Parliament elections? Right? This is something that people probably haven't heard about from other sources.
The average Briton is very interested in, I'm sure.
Wow, there we have this monstrous UK Independence Party, which is a racist, xenophobic party. And remember that when you had some little riots going on in some slum there in London, that guy Farage and his gang called for martial law in the entire United Kingdom. Martial law all over. Yes. So that's not exactly libertarian, but that's that's what you can
Brussels is pretty well declared him persona non grata under any circumstance.
I don't care what they do with him. Right?
They don't like him.
No,
well, he and Rand Paul could get together, right?
Look, it is true. Yes, Rand Paul is obviously a racist who had to kick two people out of his office in the last 18 or 24 months for being white supremacists. And the latter of the two was the so-called Confederate Avenger or Southern Avenger. I mean, these are Lincoln haters. They're glorifiers of the lost cause. This is a blind alley here in the United States or anywhere else. But now, the European election, what you've probably heard about that is that the racist parties are going to clean up, and they may. But that, we probably can't do much about that. The question is what else happens. Now, what I mean by this is, in France, you have this thing called the National Front with Marine Le Pen. Now, this is the daughter of this elderly politician now, Le Pen. And Le Pen, of course, comes right out of the Vichy fascist regime of Marshal Pétain, right? Typical French fascist background.
Yeah.
She is now, she's the vehicle, she's going to be the beneficiary of a large protest vote. It doesn't mean, whatever happens, it doesn't mean that French people really believe in the racist and xenophobic and anti-foreigner and indeed anti-worker recipes of Marine Le Pen. But she has now also, she's got this alliance going with this guy, Wilders, Geert Wilders of the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the guy who became famous around the Theo van Gogh murder, right?
Well,
this Van Gogh was the descendant of Vincent van Gogh, right? The artist who cut his ear off. You've seen him, Kirk Douglas, right? But this character was, in effect, a provocateur, and then some intelligence agency sent in an assassin to complete this dumb show, right? This was all fake. I mean, the guy really died, but it was a complete fake in the sense of the goal there was to take one of the most tolerant populations
political
in Europe,
murder.
the Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, political murder. To take the Dutch population, famous for their tolerance, right, going back to the 17th century, right, the wars of religion and so forth. They were some of the most moderate when they got the chance. This was so the idea was to take that body of anti-foreigner opinion from the Netherlands, put that together with the French. You can add in the Italian Northern League. You can add in the Austrian Freedom Party. You can add in some others. So the big headline from the European elections is likely to be that racist, xenophobic, and anti-Europe and anti-Euro parties are going to get a big success because they're the most obvious vehicles for a protest vote, and their message is easily understandable by backward, ignorant voters. Okay, fine. So that's going to be the big story. But now, the subtext is what interests me. And here we have to look with a certain granularity, because this is not stuff that you can find easily. But in Greece, and I think we've talked about this before, right, when it happened about 18 months ago, we have the Syriza, Syriza, the left bloc. And this is something that was stitched together very patiently with very good methods from about a dozen different groups, groupuscules, parties, partylets, whatever we can call them. And this is now the number one political force in Greece. The Syriza group, in terms of polling, all the polls indicate that if a general legislative, political election, general election, were held in Greece, this Syriza group would win. They would kick out
Really?
The polls show that this is now the majority. It's about 35% or 30 to 35%. And in Greece, you get a bonus for coming in first. Italy, same thing, at least at the moment, and likely to be so in the future. So this is this guy, Alexis Tsipras. And I would point to him as the most important figure who's going to come out of this election, because this other stuff is all old hat, done to death. Marine Le Pen hates foreigners, fine. Geert Wilders of the Netherlands hates foreigners. He's an Islamophobe. All right, we get it. But this Alexis Tsipras, this guy, I just saw his speech at the conference of the European Left Party, right? Which is, it's not just a Greek party. This is all over Europe, right? They have about 5% of the vote. That's fine. With 5%, you can do a lot. And they ask him, what are you running on? And he says, we're against austerity. We fight austerity. We will not tolerate austerity. And we fight the economic doctrine of neoliberalism. Now, neoliberalism, in case you haven't noticed, is what Obama represents, right? Obama, say, with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right? The free trade seller.
All right, now you've opened the door to that. What are your thoughts on TPP?
I'm absolutely against it.
I hope so.
Remember, I represent the American system. It's a glorious tradition. It's what made the country. The American system has three elements. The first is a national bank. Hamilton's first bank of the United States, Henry Clay's second bank of the United States, Daniel Webster's attempted third bank, which never flew.
Where is it when we need it?
Second point is infrastructure everywhere. Third point, a protective tariff. I'm for a protective tariff of 15%. That today would be a protective tariff. So no to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, no to the fast track, and even Harry Reid has got the message, right? Harry Reid says he's against it. He's against the fast track.
He's running scared.
That's fine. Let him run. Let him run. Yeah. Watch him run.
Right. Okay. Yeah, let's watch Harry Reid run. Back in a minute with Webster. Hold on. Okay, Webster's going to put together one of those office pool boards pretty soon, which you can participate in on the month that Rand Paul will announce that he is running for the White House.
Ho-hum. We're all yawning. This is a guy, he comes out with a straight face and says he's against extended unemployment benefits because that's going to corrupt you. He warns you against the terrible corrupting power of an unemployment check. At the same time, and this maybe leads us to another interesting topic, he's got this thing that he brought forward as his response to the State of the Union. Right now, every dirty speculator in the United States has thrown a lot of hot money into foreign speculative markets. But unfortunately, as always happens, those foreign speculative markets are now undergoing a process of contagion and meltdown. Right? South Africa, Turkey in trouble. Argentina, special case Argentina, has a good economic policy compared to many others, better at least, but they're under attack because they're independent. They don't take orders from the imperialists in the way that Turkey or others would do. So what Rand Paul is proposing right now, when a lot of speculative parasites and predators want to bring home a lot of money, Rand Paul comes forward and says, let's give them a tax holiday. Let's take a nominal 5% off the hot money they bring back, and we'll encourage them, and then they'll create jobs. No, they won't create jobs. They'll buy derivatives. They'll speculate. They'll do what they always do.
Yep.
So this guy is absolutely despicable. He's the despicable son of a despicable father. And to come out and say with a straight face that for those 1.9 million families that need unemployment checks, and anybody who's ever been on unemployment, and if that's the only income of the family, you know how dramatic that is. It's a family tragedy. It's an absolutely unacceptable, barbaric situation. He comes forward with the worst Wall Street line, right? Typical libertarian, right? What they always have been ever since David Rockefeller brought von Hayek and von Mises to the United States, right? These ideologues of exploitation and rip-off and whatever. So it's timely. But now the thing behind this, right? We've got this stock market in turmoil now. This allows us to relate to Yellen. Now, Jeff, I'm a candidate for head of the Federal Reserve still. Maybe you've seen my campaign on Twitter in particular. Tarpley for Fed head.
I like the sound.
You haven't seen it?
I don't do Twitter.
That's a terrible mistake. You're cutting yourself out of half of the world. Twitter is now the forum of world public opinion. It really is.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is. Right. And it took me about 5 minutes to register.
See,
I can do it.
Fedhead is clever because it sounds like Deadhead, and it has a certain resonance with Grateful Dead fans. That's good.
Well, that's not what I'm looking for, but, if we can get some hand raised,
take the support.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
So it's Tarpley, the number 4, Fedhead. Now, this started when it wasn't clear whether it would be Larry Summers or Yellen.
Uh-huh.
So we put forward Tarpley 4 Fedhead. You can go to this. Look on Twitter under Tarpley 4 Fedhead. You'll find it. And please retweet all of those things if you get a chance. And that's for the listeners especially. But now we've got the Bernanke era ended last Friday at midnight. And ever since Saturday, we're under the Yellen era. Now, what is Yellen? I think Yellen is pretty much an empty vessel. She gets ideas. She was getting ideas from Helicopter Ben.
You think?
Yeah, and then she was getting ideas from her husband, right, who is also an ideologue of economics. But so she is now ensconced, right? She has been passed by the Senate. We're now in the Yellen era.
Can we
she
say
is the person who
rubber stamp Yellen? Mm-hmm.
She designed the QE3. In other words, it's a support operation for derivatives. This is the irony, that the Federal Reserve has bought up about $3 trillion of bankrupt, toxic, kited derivatives, things that should not even be legal. But they bought them, and they paid real money for those $3 trillion of derivatives. If you had opened one of these credit facilities, suppose you had opened a credit facility with the equivalent, $3 to $4 trillion, let's say, and said, governors, come forward, give us your bonds, 0% 100-year bonds. You want to build the Texas T-bone. You want to build that fast rail in California down the Central Valley.
Going nowhere.
Right? No. Every railroad is a railroad to nowhere. That's ridiculous. The Transcontinental Railroad was a railroad to nowhere until you built it, and then it became a railroad to somewhere, right? When the Transcontinental Railroad would start, people say, Omaha, Denver, there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. Salt Lake City, it's all empty.
You've driven
the
up,
railroad, civilization arrives.
Webster, have you driven I-5 up to the San Joaquin Valley?
I probably have.
It's like, you'd know if you had. It's like driving the moon. Okay, there's nothing there.
Yeah, look, the other problem, that's another problem, is that under Theodore Roosevelt and his lunatic conservationism, a lot of development in the western states was stopped. Okay? Let's not kid ourselves. And once you get into the era of total Wall Street domination, they don't allow any of this to happen. But now, since we're under Yellen designed QE3. And QE3 is essentially this hot money policy, and it doesn't work. And we're seeing now that all of that hot money that was sent out, that is what created the boom in Brazil. That's what created the boom in Turkey, ironically, because people were saying, oh, the U.S. is collapsing, and Brazil and Turkey, these are the countries of the future. Well, to some extent they are, but it was also, a lot of it was a speculative bubble created by Federal Reserve hot money. But now that the Federal Reserve is tapering, i.e. bringing some of these purchases are being reduced, if the Wall Street zombie bankers can't count on $85 billion per month of derivatives being bought up, that creates this giant sucking sound, which is what we're now seeing. The hot money is flowing back from these foreign speculative markets into, I think, primarily U.S. Treasury bonds. Interest rates are going down there. Maybe into U.S. real estate, we'll soon see. But this is now a crisis, right? And every Friday, watch out, right, as the Wall Street insiders are telling us, every Friday there's a great fear that some country is going to devalue over the weekend, right? Will it be Turkey?
Yeah. No,
Last week it was Hungary. Hungary was about to devalue the forint. Now, it didn't happen.
Does that matter?
Yeah, it does. Because, look, if you go back to the Asian contagion of 98, 99, you'll see that was all based on things like the Thai baht. And you would say, wow, who cares about the Thai baht? Well, that's just the Asian contagion, which pitched the entire world into a recession. But now today, with derivatives, that would have created a depression. So Yellen has struck out before she even started. Ironically, just as Yellen arrives at the chairmanship, the toxic fruits of her failing stewardship from the previous years, when she was vice chair, as she wants to be called, this is now coming home to roost. Now, the next step, Jeff, and you're going to be very concerned about this, is this guy Stanley Fischer, right? You followed this.
Oh, yeah.
Stanley Fischer of Rhodesia, the former head of the Israeli Central Bank. He's from Citibank. He's from MIT. Above all, he's from the Bilderberger Group. This is the center of the argument for me, is Bilderberg.
Yeah.
A Bilderberg agent with his connection to the United States is tenuous in the extreme. I wonder what conceivable compassion could he have for working people, in the burned-out industrial Midwest.
Are you not leaving out a portion of his resume? He is a dual citizen. He had ranking.
Yeah, sure.
He had ranking.
Dual citizen.
But he had ranking.
He's the head of the Israeli Central Bank.
Right. Okay, let's not forget that.
No, I didn't forget it. That's the first thing I said. Born in Rhodesia, head of the Israeli Central Bank. But I'm telling you, Bilderberg, because that's the operative point.
Mm-hmm.
This is impossible. So if you don't want Stanley Fischer, Tarpley for Fed head, or in this case, Tarpley for Fed vice head, but it's close enough.
Well, if you don't make it, I suggest you start out and let's run for Congress and at least get you in the door.
No. Let's do it this way. Because obviously once you're running for Congress, you're under the realm of the Federal Elections Commission. But in the sense of running for the Federal Reserve, that's
who votes? That's appointment by Congress, correct?
It's appointed. He's proposed by the president and then voted by the Congress.
Yeah.
You've also there are two other candidates that have been named by Barkey at the same time, right? And one of them is this person. I called her Brain Dead. That's her. It's Brainard, I think. She's also an ideologue of usury and so forth. And then there's one other. So any of those three seats on the Federal Reserve Board could be me. And here's what I would propose.
Oh, it would be a joy.
$5 trillion for infrastructure, $1 trillion for the refinancing of student loans. So everybody goes down to zero.
Good. And
a series of other measures. Now, concretely, the possibilities of doing that have something to do with the European election. I want to close on that.
Oh, I hear you.
This guy, Alexis Tsipras, he's done something similar, I must say. Alexis Tsipras, although he's got more behind him, he's got a candidacy going to be head of the European Commission. Now, you know who that is today? That's this guy Barroso. Barroso is a Portuguese fascist. He comes from the Salazar party.
Another nugget.
Remember that Portugal went under fascism in 1926 and then stayed there for half a century, until 1975. Remember the Portuguese Revolution of 1975? Well, Tsipras wants to take over from Barroso. And I would say to people, if you want to have something good happen in 2014, it is a year of mass strike. That's a lot of what's going on. It's important to get Barroso out and Tsipras in. Tsipras, by the way, is going to Rome this Friday, day after tomorrow. He's going to be in Rome. He's organizing a European-wide campaign. That means that he's understood the most fundamental thing. You want to become head of the European Commission, you got to organize Europe-wide, which most of the people in Europe just don't get. So Tsipras for European Commission, head, and Tarpley for Fed head.
Well, we like that. That's very good. Good luck. Thank you, my friend. Talk to you next month.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Night.
And anything that got done by a decree. And the main practitioner of the decrees was Brüning, right? Heinrich Brüning, or Brüning. And these were the so-called Notverordnungen, emergency decrees. That's what it means. And these were austerity decrees, deflationary austerity decrees. So those were very, very bad austerity decrees. Now, when Obama comes forward and says, I'm going to do an executive order which raises the wage rate, imposes a minimum wage on future federal contracts, this is a trifling matter, but this is well within the prerogatives of a president. And anybody who screams at that is nuts. They're just showing how naive, how ignorant, how they're being led around by.
Well, they may not be nuts. They're just not as informed as you are.
Well, this is the world of Frank Luntz and Karl Rove, right, at this point, right? Republican sloganeering. But it is a serious question. Now, it's also very interesting that Italy entered the area of rule by decree at just.
Okay, here we are, hour number 2 already. Webster Tarpley joins us this hour, America's greatest living historian, in my view, friend of this program and yours for many, many years now. Here we are, and Webster, 3 years to go. People were asking what Obama was going to do. A lame duck. Was he going to get divorced? Was he going to sit around the old ballroom and watch the big screen TV? Basketball, round ball, football, doesn't matter. What's he going to do? Well, he told us a couple of weeks ago, last Monday, that he was going to use his pen and his phone and to hell with the Congress. Not a big surprise.
No.
Tell us what.
That's the Republican caricature.
Okay,
right? That's what the reactionaries are drooling.
Now, I heard him say it, but I wanted you to tell me what he was saying when he said that. He said, "I'm basically not going to be stalled and held back by legislation and waiting on same from the Congress." He said, "Quote, I've got a pen and I've got a phone." And then he went on from there to make it clear that he was going to use executive orders. Now, does this bother us or not?
No. The question is the quality of the executive orders. Executive orders to do what? If it's executive orders for the idiot chimera of global warming and imposing austerity for the polar bears, the pelicans, and the
polar bears are already dying of radiation, so let's take them off the list.
We have to worry about humans, right? The subjects of politics are human beings, and of course, then the environment for humans. That's also true. But
okay, so I just wanted to get that on the table.
Look, you're putting yourself in a relatively vulnerable position because we have the greatest saboteurs that we've ever seen, right? The reactionary Republicans and their fascist faction, the Tea Party, have successfully blocked all government. And you've now reached the point of rule by decree, which they have, in effect, imposed.
Okay, let me get this straight. I haven't put myself in any position. Asking questions does not compromise anyone. However, what you just said was very interesting. You're suggesting, in your view, and I'm sure you could back it up,
as Marx writes somewhere, he says they don't know it, but they do it. And like Marx, I don't like him that much. But fact is, these characters of today they seem to be forced to repeat all the mistakes, even though some of them have actually studied the mistakes. We'll get to
a very interesting overlay
in a minute. So the Hermann Müller government, we reached March of 1930. And the big banks in Berlin and the big industrialists of the Ruhr and Silesia were saying, okay, now we've got to cut the employer contribution to unemployment benefits. We got to make other workers pay for that. So the tax on all workers goes up to pay for the unemployment benefits of the unemployed. And at that point, the Social Democrats said no. Hermann Müller of the SPD, Social Democrats, his government fell. And from that point until Hitler's seizure of power, just about 3 years later, slightly less than 3 years, but almost 3 years later, there was no majority.
That the reactionary Republican lunatics have forced him to make this, let's call it a proclamation. I'm going to rule by decree.
There are points when the business of government has to get done. Now, let's first a couple of things about the current situation, right? There's nothing to bring forward the most sardonic laughter than the saboteurs of the state, right? The anarchists, the bankrupters of the state, coming forward and saying, now, how dare you take emergency measures after we've successfully tied the whole thing up in knots? Now, it is a serious question. The point in the Weimar Republic where rule by decree started, very interesting. It's March 1930, which is the fall of the Hermann Müller social democratic-led government.
Uh-huh.
And it fell over something very similar to the leading issue today, extended unemployment benefits.
Wow.
And how to pay for extended unemployment benefits. It is uncanny.
Yeah.
Uncanny.
Yeah.